Look, Chicago's amazing theater scene that we are always bragging about. It really is for everybody. I'm talking about you, your nieces and nephews, your granny, your co-workers, the entire graduating class of '05. And now's the best time to explore it because Chicago Theater Week is back, my friends. February 5th through the 15th, you can find tickets across Chicago's theaters for $30, $15 holla, and even less. Discover new stories, revisit classics, and be a part of something bigger. Chicago Theater Week 2026 is February 5th through the 15th. Get your tickets now at chicagotheaterweek.com and support your local small theater. Chicago knows how to kick off a new year, and that's with great food. That's right, Chicago Restaurant Week is back from January 23rd through February 8th. The 19th annual event produced by Choose Chicago features prefix menus. I'm talking $30 for lunch and brunch, $45 and $60 for dinner at more than 500 restaurants across the city. You can use the website to see the full list or filter by cuisine type or use the map feature. But pro tip, make your reservations as soon as possible because they go quick. Explore participating restaurants and menus at chicagorestaurantweek.com and book your tables now. Today on CityCast Chicago, Mayor Johnson wants to hold ICE agents accountable, but what exactly will that look like? Plus, CTA's interim chief has big plans for 2026, and they're naming the snowplows again, y'all. It's Tuesday, February 3rd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. We've got executive producer Simone Alisea in the building. Happy birthday, my friend. I know when people listening to this, your birthday will have been, here and gone, but happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Simone, over the weekend, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who over the last 7-8 months has been one of the most vocal opponents to this recent wave of violence from ICE and Border Patrol agents. But he took that further over the weekend, officially signing an executive order that him and his administration believe gives the mayor and Chicago police and officials a little bit more power, or at least a stronger paper trail to document the constitutional violations and the violence against Chicago residents. But I was a little confused reading through it. I was trying to find where the teeth in this executive order was. So can you kind of break it down and explain exactly what Johnson wants from CPD moving forward?
Yeah, I think you're struggling to find the teeth because it's
a little gummy. It's a little
gummy. That's exactly how I would describe it. And I think, it is kind of, as you said, Johnson has been, one of the most vocal opponents of the Trump administration and of ICE. But this still feels like another kind of inching forward in terms of actually holding ICE officers, immigration agents accountable for the violence they have perpetrated against the people of Chicago and, of course, in other cities as well. So this executive order directs Chicago police to, quote, investigate and document any alleged crimes committed by federal agents conducting operations in the city, and sort of refer, if the documentation indicates that a crime has been committed, refer it for prosecution to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. But number one, it does not direct police officers to actually make arrests of federal agents. Like, they're not going to be slapping handcuffs on agents who are out here. So, they're sort of like, okay, you're going to sit here and take notes and refer it to prosecution. Then there was a complication because, so the mayor puts out this statement and announces this executive order. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office on social media came out and said, we were not consulted about this, even though Johnson had said that he had consulted with the state's attorney's office. And Eileen O'Neill Burke's office was like, no, you didn't. And they were like, yes, we did. And they were like, we need to review this because we review everything to determine the legality. And like this policy needs further review. So a little bit of friction there in sort of what is the main mechanism here.
Exactly. Like, to your point, whether it's making sure that your body cam footage is gathered if you're documenting, whether it's writing it down, whatever the case may be. He wants CPD, if they are on site during one of these raids, one of these operations, one of these encounters with residents where they are tear gassing, where they're pushing down, where they're harming folks, right? Take that down, send it over to the state's attorney's office. You and I have talked about this over the last year. I think Eileen O'Neill Burke's election was arguably one of the more conservative wins during our last city election cycle. And we've wondered time and time again, well, what does that look like when she's working with the mayor, when she's working with the governor, and throughout their calls to, whether it's the mayor recently calling to abolish ICE, whether it was the governor calling to defund them, whether there was organizers and advocates across the city saying that, right, our rights are being violated, our neighborhoods are being terrorized. O'Neill Burke had largely been silent, was not one of those officials who joined the chorus against Border Patrol and the Department of Homeland Security. And so this moment in which the mayor implies that, no, O'Neill Burke and her office are on the same side here, want to hold these individuals accountable. I think this was our first example of O'Neill Burke sort of once again separating themselves from the mayor, from the governor. And the mayor sort of had to come back and say, okay, we didn't talk to you directly, but we talked to someone in your office who did read through this policy, did give the go ahead. And yet when this press release came out, the state's attorney who is being quoted is from Philadelphia.
Yeah, this is so interesting, right? Yeah, so Mayor Johnson, he puts out this press release announcing the executive order, and there's a statement from Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, who in Philly, their officials have come out even more aggressively and
10
strongly.
toes down.
Yeah, including, I think, their police chief as well, as I recall.
At one point, she said, we want all the smoke. If you come into our neighborhoods, terrorizing our community members, beating up on folks, then you're going to have to deal with us, which again is very similar to what you have heard from our governor, from our mayor. And the case still remains in Philly and in Chicago. Well, what does that look like on the ground?
Even though the rhetoric may be similar, I do think the fact that in Philadelphia, it's coming from people who work within the criminal legal system, right? The fact that it's coming from their head prosecutor, that actually means something. Actually prosecuting for crimes is an actual thing you can do.
A district attorney said, we are going to hunt you down, which I think is important when you're thinking about their state overall, when you see other parts of Pennsylvania signing agreements to cooperate with ICE. It has been really moving to see just how vocal the Philadelphia officials have come out. But I will say, having followed what happened in our city, what happened with our colleagues in Portland and in the Twin Cities, right? I wonder if that tune changes if agents are on the ground in Philadelphia, if they start seeing tear gas in their neighborhoods. Yes. I think they are very much willing to stand by. But again, we've watched our mayor and our governor, come out full-throated when the Trump administration, when the inauguration happened, when Holman was in Chicago, right, reiterating that we're a hellhole that they're going to attack. And then once the agents got here and people were starting to get shot and killed and starting to get tear gas, right, the things they were able to actually do, right, the governor sent in the state police. We have video of state police also participating in violent encounters with protesters, right? We had Brandon Johnson sign an executive order to keep operations from ICE and Border Patrol off of public property. But, what did that ultimately amount to?
Well, and the enforcement mechanism was, we'll make a sign, right? That was the enforcement mechanism.
That's my thing. It's like once they pull up to the city, right, so much of the people who are doing the direct encountering are neighborhoods, are residents, are Migrant Watch, or advocacy groups. And so, again, once they arrive with the way that they move and the impunity they move with, sure, there may be a moment when they leave, but the damage is typically already done. And the reason they left was not because of some police or state's attorney or even a federal judge or a courtroom stepping in to stop them.
Yeah, but I do think there is a big difference between the lawsuits we've seen and the sort of civil. Those are essentially like sort of, they're not even civil penalties. It's sort of like administrative. It's a branch holding another branch accountable, right? It's kind of what's going on when we see these court cases that have played out. Criminal prosecution is a totally different animal. Like it's a very different thing. And, in Philadelphia, and some of these other district attorneys who have come together on a coalition, the things that they're talking about are, right, obviously things like criminal homicide, right, in the event that an agent kills a person, right? But also things like obstruction of justice, right? Things that kind of promote a cover-up, tampering with evidence, perjury, false oath, physical assault, right?
Maybe driving people off the road.
Right. Like those as criminal. But again, we also know from how difficult it is to prosecute local police officers, the bar is really, really, really high to prosecute criminally law enforcement agents who are doing things in the course of their job, in the line of duty. And so I will be really curious to see if any of these attorneys, these prosecutors who have come out to say we're absolutely going to prosecute crimes, how that is actually going to play out in the courts. I think it puts judges in an interesting position. And again, this is going to happen in state court. Maybe, we think that's their hope, but like, are the federal courts going to come in and say, no, this is our jurisdiction? Like,
and again, the two individuals who have been identified in Twin Cities have since been put on leave.
Well, the person who shot Marimar Martinez here in Chicago, right? That was a whole thing where that agent then went to Maine with the car that supposedly, was involved in the whole event. There was just like a chain of custody issue where we just completely lost track of not only the agent, but the vehicle involved, right?
Yeah. And so the way they're moving right now, I think provides so many obstacles, in addition to the fact that right now, our state's attorney has not stood in a press conference alongside the mayor or the governor or advocacy groups and says she stands with them, that she's going to use all of her resources and her entire office and every tool at her capacity to protect Chicagoans. That has not been her rhetoric. And so I wonder, when, say, an incident takes place and, right, everyone does the documentation and then it gets to her office, it doesn't seem like they can force them to take on cases or to bring up charges. And so if the buck ends up stopping there, again, maybe that's important. Maybe it's important for that political pressure to hit the state's attorney's office during this moment in ways we haven't seen thus far. And so maybe there's some strategy to the mayor's protocol.
I mean, I think that I don't know if it's strategy per se, but I think it's something that this is issuing an executive order and directing the police department is within the mayor's purview. That is something the mayor can do. That's within the executive branch's purview. The state's attorney's office will do what it does. I think it's also important to note that the governor also came out, because I don't know if you remember this, Jacoby, but late last year, Pritzker had created this commission, this accountability commission that was supposed to kind of look into, constitutional violations by immigration agents. And he directed that commission late last week to, again, it's all very squishy, to probe into actions to determine if crimes were committed and hold them accountable. By what mechanism? ? Prosecution again kind of seems to be on the table, but who's doing the prosecuting? Who is actually going to bring a case before a judge and say, here's the evidence that a crime was committed? Who's going to actually do it? And that, I think, no one, even in cities where you have prosecutors who are willing, maybe it's not been tested yet.
One thing Chicago gonna talk about is our architecture. I bet any single person listening right now could probably point out a fun fact about one of our historic buildings. You done probably took your people on the riverboat tour, or at the very least, you out here shaming other people's skyline because it's not ours. which is why it makes perfect sense that the Architecture and Design Film Festival has returned to the city for its 4th year at the Chicago Architecture Center. It's 10 films that explore architecture, design, creativity, and human connection. And we're not just talking about buildings. Themes range from graphic design to the architecture of NASA space shuttles to protected bike lanes. This year's festival is February 19th through the 22nd at the Siskel Film Center, and several of the screenings include discussions with the filmmakers who are flying in from all over the world. Find all the film trailers and ticketing information at architecture.org/filmfest. The Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College Chicago is celebrating their 50th anniversary all year long. First thing you're going to want to do is stop by the exhibition MOCP at 50, Collecting Through the Decades. It's on view through May 16th, and it explores how the museum built their one-of-a-kind collection of nearly 18,000 artworks. Then mark your calendars for February 26th because they throwing a little party. Darkroom is the museum's annual benefit auction. You can experience beautiful and thought-provoking photography, meet some artists, and enjoy food and drinks from around the city. So make some time to stop by soon. You can find info about the exhibition or buy tickets to Darkroom at mocp.org. One thing you and I have been talking about pretty regularly over the last few months is the amount of vacancies that exist inside of city government. But to be clear, even if a permanent head hasn't been named to, let's call it the Chicago Housing Authority or Chicago Public Schools or, Chicago Transit Authority, right? They do have interim leaders who are carrying forth the day-to-day, month-by-month agenda. And that is very true at CTA, where the interim chief, Nora Learson, is now going into a year as the head of CTA without ever being named the full-time leader. That hasn't stopped her from, again, setting the agenda for 2026. And it sounds like Learson has some pretty significant plans for CTA's next 12 months.
Yeah, the Chicago Tribune talked to Learson, and I think has been, which is great. It's a good time for it, as you said, about a year into her tenure as acting head of the CTA. Right. I think it's important to think back to how she got into this position, right? Which was she took over from Dorval Carter, whom for years and years after, sort of the pandemic crushed ridership at the CTA, there were a lot of worries about crime, cleanliness, just the general experience of riding the CTA. And Carter, who was not going to city council meetings that he was asked to come to talk about it. And so a lot of pressure on the Johnson administration to replace. Carter stepped down in January of last year, and Nora Learson who was the chief of staff, I believe, at the time, stepped up into the acting role. Kind of a wild time. And it's interesting because in 2025, we know hiring is up, a big issue, right? During the sort of the pandemic, post-pandemic immediate aftermath was there weren't enough operators. We are now at a point where operators are at the same number, I think, that they were in 2019.
There are 470 more bus operators than 2019 and about the same number of rail operators as they had last year.
And, I think the ridership numbers have definitely been trending up. We're not quite at 2019 levels yet.
About 70% of 2019.
The frequency, and I think anyone who rides the CTA and has ridden the CTA over the past few years, has definitely gotten better. Although people still complain that trains don't come, buses don't come. But it has definitely gotten a lot better since it's sort of its valley. And it's interesting because one of the things the Tribune asked was sort of like, okay, well, back then you didn't have enough operators to operate the trains and buses. Of course, they weren't going to come. There weren't going to be enough. Now you have that. What is going on?
She had a good answer for that.
She did.
She said one of the main reasons for delays are slow zones. The fact that the state of some of our tracks are so old that it requires the operators to take a much lower speed. And so you're thinking about the Blue Line, for example, in 2019, about 63% of the branch was designated as a slow zone. That is up to 82%.
Which one of our most high ridership lines, right?
Only one of two that are 24 hours right now. And one of her other plans for 2026 is to bring the Orange Line, the trip to Midway, up to 24 hours. But again, like you said, the second most populated line in the city, 82% of it required to go under the allowed speed limit. It says a lot, but I also imagine it's very difficult to do construction on the Blue Line. What does it mean to shut down, entire parts of the line or segments of the line?
Well, we experienced that with the Red Line, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's the Red Line modernization. As someone who lives on the north side, I can tell you, it was very irritating to not have those stops. But I love them now. They're beautiful. Now
they look gorgeous
open,
now.
They look great. They look great. And I think some of these other issues, it's interesting because we do know that violent crime is down on the CTA.
Yes, I believe down 10% since 2022. However, as you know, we've had a couple of high profile incidents over the last few months. At any time there is someone who is hurt, robbed, or killed near or on transit, right? That sends shockwaves through the city. It is very terrifying. It doesn't represent any, sort of spike in violent crimes or incidents on the train, but it takes up a lot of our attention.
Well, especially when you have the federal government who sort of takes a hold of it and makes it, this sort of cudgel by which to withhold federal funding, which is also sort of in the works right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Late last year, the Trump administration threatened to withhold some $50 million of federal funding unless the CTA came up with a security plan. They came out with that plan. They, more cops, more canines, that kind of thing, to create a higher visibility presence. The federal government said that was inadequate, and now the CTA has until March to revise that plan. And it's interesting. It puts Learson and Chicago in a really awkward position where they are actively negotiating with the Trump administration, in contact, trying to kind of get this figured out in order to not lose more funding. There's other, sort of pots of funding that are being threatened for other reasons.
$2 billion from the Red Line extension. And I will say, Learson in this interview plays it very strategically. One thing people were upset with Carter, beyond all of the issues that the train was going from, is they felt, well, whenever he talked in an interview in front of city council, he seemed pissed off. He seemed very defensive, seemed very dismissive. And in this case, Learson seems like she's managing the rightful anger and frustration from the Johnson administration, who's like, whatever pressure we can use to sue the federal government, bring a lawsuit for, right, to make sure this funding is secure. Learson is like, well, maybe not that option yet. Let's see if we can keep the $2 billion, which, again, I think we should pay very close attention to, because what they wanted to release that money was to basically scrap any minority contracting around the far South Side development. And I would hate for that to be capitulated to, sort of behind closed doors. And so I do want to pay a lot of attention to this negotiating that's happening. But I will say, with federal funding being threatened across all of our government agencies, I am interested to see what this, attorney is able to do. She seems very politically insightful. Like, she understands the problems facing the system, but when she was asked about the presence of police, she said, yes, we are complying with the federal government's pressure to increase visibility, but does not believe that is the entire strategy and the only way to go about improving the quality people feel on the train. When it talks about ridership, unlike Carter, who they said maybe never really rode the train during his time, she says she's a daily Green Line rider and understands things like smoking impacts ridership, but is saying, hey, we need to have a more nuanced discussion about how behaviors have changed on and around the CTA in the last few years. When she was asked, should CTA be setting aside funding to provide resource for the unhoused, she said, well, yes, I think that's that's a place that we have a role and a responsibility. And so it's very clear that she has an understanding of the problems facing CTA.
Well, and for in order to actually enact change on a system that is going to improve that system for that Chicagoans use every single day, I actually do think in this case that matters, because
Exactly.
This is a case where it's not just about what kind of stance you take, but what you actually get done. You know what I mean? Like, what can you actually make happen?
Mm-hmm.
The funding thing for folks who are unhoused, because this was the thing I didn't know, and I think was an interesting fact to come out of this, is that CTA has apparently had apparently kind of socked away $1.6 million in its 2026 budget to pay for shelter beds, essentially to offer beds to folks who are currently sheltering on the trains and on the buses. I had no idea this was going on. I think this is really interesting. And to your point, so the Trib asks essentially, like, should this be a transit agency's responsibility? And, I think the fact of the matter is again, transit is that touch point for so many people, and it is for so many that warm place you can sit and stay. But of course, that shouldn't be that point of shelter, right? There should be a place that folks can go. And so I thought that was an interesting fact. The other interesting thing that I didn't know that I didn't quite put two and two together as I was reading this, like we've said, she's been in this acting role for about a year. I'm sure everybody's wondering, like, okay, when is Johnson gonna actually, make this final or appoint somebody else? And there's sort of an interesting thing here, because we know that as part of the funding bailout package that Springfield passed last year, there's also a creation of a new oversight agency for regional transit, the Northern Illinois Transit Authority, NITA. It's interesting because that body, which won't be sort of fully constituted, that commission won't be fully constituted until June, is supposed to have a role in confirming any leadership appointments that the mayor of Chicago might make to the CTA, which currently it doesn't quite work like that. The mayor has a bit more power because of the way the current CTA board is kind of constituted. And I'm kind of curious is the Johnson administration is his disposition to say, get someone in before, all of a sudden the rules kind of change. He has certainly done that in other aspects. Think about the school board and, that whole fiasco. Or is he kind of waiting for the process to kind of play out and maybe just like smooth transition? There's a lot that is unclear about, like, what is the Johnson administration doing on this?
And the CTA, Learson has been with them for 10 years. And so I think an extended period in this leadership role is justifiable. But again, come out and say that. Make a hire, like make a permanent hire somewhere.
Well,
come out and say that was your justification.
What is the process? I don't even need to know, like, what is the process of this hire?
We understand these are difficult roles. We get third largest city hiring people in these positions. Not a lot of qualified people just sort of sitting in the ready. I do think it is smart for Learson to take this opportunity to put themselves on a public stage to make their case to all of Chicagoans why they believe they should be in this role. Make sure ridership numbers are up. Provide resources for the unhoused. Make sure people feel safe on and around buses and trains and platforms. Those are really long-term things that need nuanced solutions. I'm interested to see where the mayor goes from here. Dear CityCast listeners, today is going to be a good day, and here's why. Dear Evan Hansen is coming to the Paramount Theater in Aurora. If you've got any theater folks in your life, you have definitely heard them singing this soundtrack before, and for good reason. 6 Tonys, a Grammy for Best Musical Theater Album, national tour after national tour, and a story for every single person who just wants to be seen. A Little White Lie becomes this enormous blizzard of untruths, taking lonely, anxious teen Evan on a wild journey towards love and acceptance, even when you make mistakes. Catch Dear Evan Hansen February 4th through March 22nd at Paramount Theater in Aurora. You do not want to miss this deal. Get your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com. It's that time of year again when Chicago's Department of Streets and Sanitation come together to pick 6 new names for some of the city's snowplows. They've been doing this for the last few years, and they've whittled it down to 25 final names. Simone, you already know this is one of my least favorite contests in the city, but some of these names were pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, I think so. I think we got to talk about the fact that the name Abolish ICE had been submitted, 9,300 times, constituted, some 70% of all entries. And that's in addition to other sort of anti-immigration enforcement sentiments, right? Like ICE be gone, no more Mr. Ice Guy, Icebreaker, which didn't make the finalist list, but Abolish ICE did. And Abolish ICE, of course, also got the nod of approval from Mayor Brandon Johnson. This was so interesting to me because this is fascinating to me because I remember maybe right before Operation Midway Blitz or right as it was getting underway, there was this like kind of viral video or meme circulating on social media, and people kept being like, oh, like Chicago's so real. They're using their ice plows to block ICE, to block immigration agents. And you and I came on the show and we were like, number one, not only is that not true, like not only is that not correct, but in fact, like the city often deploys snow plows and other streets and sand vehicles when they are trying to contain protests. And so typically used against protesters, not being used against federal agents, and was not the case in this moment. And so I think there's sort of there's an irony, and I think it could only happen in 2026, I guess, where you have a snowplow that may one day be used to block protesters against ICE. That's called Abolish ICE. I don't know. It's that's performance art as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I will say, similar to our conversation last week, to see Abolish ICE as a phrase enter into the mainstream, you see it in political commercials from, our candidates for U.S. Senate. I saw it in a Roger Krishnamurthy ad, a Juliana Stratton ad. I saw it coming out of Mayor Johnson's mouth. People have, couched it and used qualifiers, but the idea that this has gotten to a sort of place of national conversation, I think is very interesting, very motivating. My one big concern, especially as we may see it on a snowplow with a photo op with the individual who is the earliest to suggest that with their city swag, is that I'm afraid that it plays into capitalism's ability to subsume any and all critiques about itself. That are we taking something that, again, abolition, y'all, has roots back to the ending of chattel slavery. And, the conversation around abolish police and abolish prisons was a direct connection to that legacy. And so when we talk about abolish ICE and we start seeing politicians use it, I don't want it to become this watered down rallying cry that we put on snowplows and t-shirts, and it loses its historical significance that says dehumanization is built into the fabric of this country, into the genesis of this country, from genocide to enslavement. And I don't want a phrase as powerful potentially as abolish ICE to become the next Instagram black box. And so that's my biggest concern. When I see the snowplow, I think about the ways it has been used to block off protesters, keep access from downtown during major organizing moments.
Maybe,
and so,
I don't know if it's a PR thing for this. Like, right, the snowplow also does, right, plow the snow.
Yeah, but we think it does a shitty job at that too, Simone.
A lot of people do. That's true. I actually think Chicago does really. This is my hot take. I think Chicago does a pretty good job plowing the streets. Actually, maybe it's just because I come from a place where we don't plow streets at all, and so just like any clearing of streets is just a miracle to me. I think we can afford to. In the same way, we always complain about the CTA even when it's running at its height. I think there's.
No, that's my heel. You know me. I'm always like, oh, I actually think. I've been to a lot of places, y'all. CTA ain't all that bad.
It's not that bad.
Compare.
You know what you see nothing's perfect, right? No, like I said, I think it would be there's an element of performance art here, which is just fascinating to watch. Let's talk about some of the maybe less politically charged names. Are there any on here that catch your eye?
Mini Monosno and Pope Frio.
Pope Frio the 14th is pretty good.
I do like Pope Frio.
Pope Frio is really good. That's because there was another Pope one that was like the Pope Snow, and it was too long. It was too long for a name. But Pope Frio the 14th is pretty cool. Sven Cooley is kind of fun.
Derek Froese.
Like I said, I like It's Time for the Plowculator. That really just truly it just tickles me.
This isn't Florida. That has so many. That's
like another one that feels like performance
entendre.
art. That's wild. It's a Herbs and Hortsnow is pretty good too. What a deep cut that is for Chicagoans. What's the actual Latin? Herbs and Horto, which is city and a garden to refer to Chicago. It's that's pretty good. But yeah, there's 25. There's and there's also Daniel on the Chicago Parks too. Daniel Burnham. Oh, cute.
I kind of like that one.
Lots of good ones. I have a feeling Abolish Ice is going to win, which again will just be kind of wild to have a snowplow that
on a snowplow.
Yeah, and again, like there's going to be pictures and stuff.
Residents may view the list of finalists and vote for up to 6 names at chicagoshovels.org by Saturday, February 14th. Once the 6 winners are chosen, they're going to mock up the signs, take some pictures with the winners. Y'all going to get some city merch.
It'll be interesting.
Recent names include Mrs. O'Leary's Plow, fire.
That one was good.
Sears Plower, Control Salt Delete.
Bozo the Plown.
Ernie Snowbanks.
Hey, you just did a video about Ernie Banks.
Come on. And Snower Whacker.
Snower Whacker's pretty good.
Yeah. I hate the concept, but I will say some of the names they kind of give me. It's like a mock up.
Jacoby, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to like you can still have fun with the joke. It's okay. No one's gonna be mad.
I want to give a huge thank you to our executive producer, Simone Alisea.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
Hey, if you got thoughts on today's episode, feel free to reach out to us at 773-780-0246. We look forward to hearing from you. Before we get out of here, I got some good news. Chicago's legendary blues bar Rosa's Lounge is celebrating their 42nd anniversary this Friday and Saturday alongside Billy Branch and the Son of Blues. This is one of the first places I ever got to tell a story live in person here in Chicago, and so Rosa's has a special place in my heart. I will drop a link in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you for listening, reading, for signing up for our daily newsletter at chicago.citycast.fm, and most importantly, being here bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.